the Badlands. Explain those Badlands. That's a hell of a name.
All right, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody, for this week's Breaking History. I'm always glad to be joined by my co-host, Gordon Ghost-based Patrick Henry. How you doing?
Oh, man, I'm doing well. We've been pummeled by snow a few times in the past week, so for the first time, the kids are at school. Got to go to the gym after like a 2-hour delay. So, yeah, it's like the first time I've gotten to go to the gym in a couple of days because just have had the kids for days and days. How are you?
Okay, yeah, the pummeling is going on right now. The snow is coming down, so it seems like the dreams of global warming are dissipating faster and faster with every moment. And well, you heard that even Bill Gates had recently said that global warming is no longer the threat he thought it was. So that's a pretty big admission from Bill Gates himself.
So yeah, what's climate change now? It's not global warming. It's climate change, which is just a perpetually moving target that is very ambiguous and we can't quite define. But give us all of your money, give us all your rights, and stop exercising freedom and sovereignty. And we promise we will make the weather nice for you.
It's so dirty, eh? Like the playing around with the goalposts. Because I remember when I was young in elementary school, maybe you had a similar experience. Was the ozone layer? Remember in early 90s, that was like a big thing we were being hammered with. Was the ozone layer had holes in it. And that's why we had to shut down. And that was a big thing, I guess, in the 80s and 90s. And then all of a sudden they stopped talking about it because there's clearly no holes in the ozone layer. They discovered that the ozone layer is not this like homogeneous, thick thing like these computer models were showing us. It's a very like fluid process. Some areas it's thinner, some areas it's thicker. It's like clouds almost, and but that didn't stop us nonetheless from completely legalizing chlorofluorocarbons like CFCs. CFC, the chlorofluorocarbons, CFCs, which was like the cheapest way of building fridges, like the cheapest chemical that you would put in fridges for refrigeration. But once they were banned, all of a sudden, whole swaths of Africa were no longer allowed to have refrigeration anymore. It's probably led to the death of like 100 million people because all of a sudden food rots. You can't. And when you're dealing with a world of scarcity and poverty caused by this empire, all of a sudden a lack of cheap and abundant refrigeration will kill a lot of people. But we did it to stop the ozone layer, and then it became the greenhouse effect. Then global warming. Now it's like you said. Now it's the weather, changing climate. And
wasn't it like acid rain for 5 minutes? Like acid rain in like the 70s or something. I was before my time, but I've heard of such things.
And before that, I was watching a documentary from the 70s on YouTube on why we need to shut down industry to stop global cooling. And you have Leonard Nimoy from the Spock from, the actor Leonard Nimoy is like the narrator, and he's like walking around in the cold. And the propaganda, the messaging of this coming Ice Age film was that we human beings and human factories were spewing out carbon dioxide and other particulates from pollution, which was going to bounce the sunlight from the earth that was embedding itself into the atmosphere, resulting in a downturn of cooling unless we raced really fast to shut down industry. So we're coming kind of full circle now because now people are finally realizing that actually the last 35, 36 years of apparent average like warming that went on from like 1975 until 2003 or 2004, that warming period is totally a blip on the screen. Now we're going back for the past 15 years. We've been kind of like leveling off, and it's been transitioning back towards a natural state of cooling, which should be causing us to think about like, well, maybe what causes ice ages? Like maybe people will die if these natural astrophysical ice age cycles are not understood and dealt with. Maybe we could save a lot of people if we actually understood what we're going into, because the Holocene did happen like what, 10,000 years ago when You had big flood myths around the world because ice caps were melting, resulting in rising sea levels. That was 10,000 years ago. It's like we're overdue at this point for going back into an ice age, because that's been the norm for the past 2 million years. It's been mostly ice ages. And then you get these little blips of 10,000 year warming periods that then like sink back into 80,000 year ice ages. So it's like, it seems like maybe there's reality is imposing itself onto the paradigm. I don't know if people are going to use this as an opportunity to learn something new or not. But before we get into, we'll put that aside. That's a whole side conversation. We'll get into some politics and some history. Before we do, we're going to listen to a word from one or two of today's sponsors, the first being Rise Attire.
Cheers, Badlanders. Ready to stuff your stockings with some new streetwear that'll really get the jimmies rustling? The holidays are here, and so is the new Rise Badlands collection, just in time to go walking in a winter wonderland. No matter where you're from, we're all Badlands natives with these brand new threads. Show up with the purtiest ugly sweater at the party with the Badlands Christmas collection, or make your favorite Badlander buddy feel all warm and fuzzy with a variety of plush and Sherpa blankets to choose from. Plus, you can stack the classics under the tree, deck the halls with Devolution, rock around the Christmas tree with Rushmore, or have yourself a merry little clown world. Everything we do is custom made from scratch by the elves at our East Peoria, Illinois facility, who are all legal U.S. citizens. But the process takes time, so don't wait. Grab your gear today at badlandsmedia.tv/rise. Under the tree and over the target.
Creative little ad. I like that. Let's do one from Tamarack. Let's do Tamarack. Okay, Tamarack Gardens coming up. All right, are you looking for a better alternative to the over-the-counter drugstore medications? Tamarack Garden began from a parent's desperate need for safe and effective options for their kids, tired of toxic chemicals. Taking matters into their own hands, they began crafting medicine from weeds, wildflowers, and herbs, the original time-tested healers that modern medicine cannot match. Packed with antiviral herbs to boost immunity and fight illness, Tamarack Garden has, for a limited time, their elderberry and rose hip syrup kit available. Not only is it delicious for no more battles with kids and easy to make, it will keep you and your family healthy for all fall and winter. Introducing Tamarack Garden's new baby line, clean, non-toxic, and gentle for newborns and moms, relieving cradle, cap, diaper rash, stretch marks, and postpartum pain. Visit tamarackgarden.com and use promo code Badlands for $10 off over orders over $50. Remember to eat your weeds. tamarackgarden.com, promo code Badlands. Alrighty. So a lot of points to hit at. We don't have too much time today, like usual. It's kind of Wednesdays are a little bit tough for me scheduling wise. So I know that you've been keeping your eyeball on some interesting anomalous developments that have been going on in Africa, in the Sahel. You've also, I just noticed that it looks kind of like, just segue or side note, our living rooms kind of have like a parallel mirror image to them. It's kind of,
I just noticed that. You're right. Yeah. Wow.
That's kind of interesting.
That's cool. That is interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So back to the track. All right. So then you also have some developments around Zelensky in Ukraine, who seems finally has is breaking under certain pressures to make Ukraine potentially a democracy again, maybe by allowing for some elections. Got corruption scandals as well, NATO military procurement scandals by certain people running massive graft in NATO and dealing with Israeli arms companies. So I don't know, and more. There's a lot more going on. So I don't know, but with all of these things going on, anything you'd like to hit at today is the most important to start with?
Well, I think let's see. I think the most important thing just to mention to kind of start everything is this new national security strategy that the White House released last week.
Okay,
or released on Friday rather. It's pretty significant. I read through it on my show yesterday. I spent like 2 hours, my entire show, just reading through it. So we don't need to do that again. Anyone who wants to hear me read through it, go watch Geopolitics with Ghost on Badlands from yesterday. But it's a significant document, and the reason it's significant is because everything that we've talked about, that I've speculated on, without true certainty, seems to be affirmed, it more or less in some ways, with this document. And what I mean by that is that President Trump has been putting out rhetoric for some time now that I would describe as, on its surface, neocon, right? Like he has been leaning into like the whole neocon, like forever warmongering posture that gets people like Lindsey Graham all hot and bothered in a really good way, like really excited way. Like Lindsey Graham gets really excited whenever President Trump talks about Venezuela or talks about Israel or talks about any of it, right? Trump has been talking about moving nuclear submarines close to Russia, and then Medvedev said, "Oh yeah, well, we're going to nuke London if you do that." All those things. Then he comes out with this national security strategy, and the national security strategy is just a total shot across the bow for all of that, because it comes out and just flies in the face of the neocons. And the reason it's significant is because we've seen, I think for the past 30 years, they've been coming out with these things, and every single iteration of it, whether it's Democrat or Republican president, they always identify, the boogeymen around the world. The CCP was one of them. Radical Islamic terrorism eventually became one as well. A number of other ones. Those things, none of those things are mentioned in this document. And these documents are basically declarations of war, like soft declarations of war against all these entities, right? So it's basically promises that we're going to be hyper aggressive and we're going to engage in warfare against these entities in a really aggressive way, and not just kinetic warfare, but other forms of warfare as well. Kinetic, cyber, narrative, information, etc.
Mm-hmm.
This document explicitly repudiates all of that and says we're not doing that anymore. We're done doing that. We're not going to go after any of those things. We're going to focus back on America. We're going to bring our military back into this hemisphere. We're going to focus on securing the Caribbean and securing our borders, basically, not just the border at Mexico, but our waterways, our trade routes. And basically, we are going to help establish I don't think it uses the word multipolar, but it describes a multipolar world order where strong partnerships are established and these balances of power are created in other regions of the world so that those balances of power can become new paradigms to promote peace in those regions. For example, in the Middle East, while it doesn't explicitly spell this out, this appears to be what they're doing. Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and I think Iran kind of being the three big powers that are going to balance out the Middle East. Potentially Israel, if they don't,
totally screw up. Yeah.
If they don't get themselves destroyed, which I would not totally rule out as in the realm of possibilities. I think there is a possibility that they will find themselves politically insolvent, for lack of a better word. Doesn't mean Israel won't exist. I just don't think this Jewish supremacy Zionist state is going to exist anymore. So what happens after that, we'll see. But I think more important than Israel is Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and Iran, and those three balancing out. And what's interesting is that if you go read Pipelinistan from 2008, written by Pepe Escobar, who I think is a great thinker and he's a great writer. He comes at this obviously from a very opposite standpoint than President Trump, and he actually views President Trump as like a neocon warmonger now because of all the surface level rhetoric that Trump's been putting out there. But Pepe Escobar in 2008 described in Pipelinistan, he said the only thing that can really thwart this this hegemonic unipolar Western blob, for I forget what the exact wording he used to describe it, is basically like a trilateral alliance between Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and Iran. He said, like, if those three can figure out a way to create a balance of power in the Middle East, that would upset the plans that George Bush neocons have for the Middle East.
Well, and it definitely brings in, I mean, the fact that Turkey is walking these two worlds as a member state of NATO. I know that you yesterday put out a little slug, a briefing report that touched upon something to do with this image here, featuring a very important network of pipelines stretching from Russia through Turkey, Turkey playing a very, very key role. Hungary plays a big role, and that would bring Russian gas effectively, increasingly to Europe. Also, you've got, the Turk Stream pipeline. It's another big one that Turkey manages from Russia that moves gas, again, back into Europe, which has basically sabotaged itself by destroying Nord Stream 1, Nord Stream 2, along with the, certain other forces that would really wanted to try to cripple Russia economically, destroy Russia economically. And so, but if that meant destroying all of Europe at the same time, then so be it. And Turkey's been playing some games here. So I don't know if you want to go through some of the that report that you drafted dealing with the Turkey-Hungary connection in a bit more.
Yeah, sure. So the thing that I was responding to, let me pull. I have that pulled up, so let me just share my screen.
Okay. Sure.
I was responding to the fact that Erdogan and Viktor Orban had met, and as the Cradle reported, among others, Turkey to guarantee Russian gas flow to Hungary, says Orban. Turkey's president Recep Tayyip Erdogan and Hungary's prime minister Viktor Orban have reached an understanding that Turkey will assure the continued transit of Russian gas to Hungary. Orban announced today Hungary signed a 15-year agreement in 2021 to purchase 4.5 billion cubic meters of gas annually from Russia and stepped up imports from Gazprom last year, bringing in about 7.5 billion cubic meters via the Turk Stream pipeline. Quote, today I agree with the president that you, Turkey, will guarantee the route so that we can transport gas from Russia to Hungary, Orban said during a press conference aired by the state news channel M1. He added that so far this year, Hungary has received 7.5 billion cubic meters through Turk Stream. And this is the map. This is the map that illustrates how this how the logistics of this work. So the blue line that you see here in the map it's not the best map because the water and the land that they're not trying to focus on is very similar in color. But you can see here the Russia in the east, the blue line, the pipeline comes from Russia, goes across the Black Sea, terminates in the far western reaches of Turkey, and then splits off into multiple directions, but goes north through Bulgaria and Serbia into Hungary. So this is something that Viktor Orban's been talking about throughout the Biden presidency, is making sure that they get this gas that they signed this agreement for in 2021. And obviously NATO and the EU are threatening this because they don't want Russian gas flowing into Europe from any direction, which is why they took out the Nord Stream pipeline. The way I see this all playing out, and this isn't like a new revelation for me, but it certainly seems to be some affirmation that I think this is the direction it's going, is that Turkey is really becoming the turd in the punch bowl for both the Ukraine conflict and the Israel conflict. And I think that it's pretty amazing that Turkey has such a unique characteristic, like such a unique identity, being a Muslim country, being so geographically significant to the Black Sea, which makes it geographically significant to Russia, which makes it a key, like probably one of the most important members of NATO. The fact that it has the second largest army in NATO behind the United States, that's a pretty interesting fact. The fact that it has the largest army in the largest military in the Middle East in terms of manpower. I think Iran would be a more powerful military, but Turkey has the largest, the most soldiers. That really gives it a unique dynamic and makes it very unique in terms of being able to deal with both the conflict in the Black Sea, which you could describe, as the Russia-Ukraine conflict, and then the conflict in the Eastern Mediterranean, the conflict between not just Israel in Gaza or Israel in Syria, but Israel in Lebanon, Israel in Jordan, Israel in Hezbollah, Israel in Iran, pretty much Israel and the rest of the Middle East. So yeah, I mean, I think that Erdogan is becoming a very, very important figure right now in this moment in time. And the fact that President Trump has been boosting him since December, since Assad was overthrown. I don't think that's a coincidence. I think the fact that Trump has talked about how great Erdogan is and how important he is and how much he loves him and all those things is signal. And again, this aligns with a lot of the things that are written in the strategic, the national security strategy.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, do you see any harmonization that is of increased interest between Turkey, Iran, and Saudi Arabia as a trifecta? Like, do you find any policies currently being made public that indicate more collaboration or harmonization of planning right now, whether on the economic, on the military, on the energy levels, or do you find that they're keeping a lot of that stuff still on the back burner?
Well, there are certainly like things that are happening that I find very encouraging. One of them, I have one of these articles pulled up. Let me make sure I have the other one. The other one is, so the first one I can share is this one. And this answers your question, I think, a little more directly. This is, I believe, from today. Yeah, from yesterday. Saudi Arabia, Iran affirm commitment to implementing the Beijing Agreement. Saudi Arabia and Iran affirmed their commitment to implementing the Beijing Agreement during a meeting in Tehran on Tuesday. Saudi Deputy Foreign Minister Walid al-Kharjiri attended the third meeting of the joint tripartite committee between Saudi Arabia, Iran, and China. The Saudi and Iranian sides affirmed their commitment to implementing the Beijing Agreement in its entirety and their continued pursuit of strengthening good neighborly relations between their countries through adherence to the Charter of the United Nations, the Charter of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, and international law, the Saudi press agency said in a statement. Saudi Arabia and Iran also welcomed the continued positive role China has played, as well as its continued support in implementing the Beijing Agreement. So you have that. You have let's see.
That's good. Yeah.
Yeah. You have this story, which I thought that was pulled up. Qatar and Saudi Arabia just announced yesterday that they are signing a high-speed rail agreement, and that's a big deal because anyone who's listened to my content and understands the history here, Saudi Arabia and Qatar were like mortal enemies in 2017, and actually had a war going between 2017 and 2021, to the extent that MBS was putting out RFPs for request for proposal to dig a canal between Saudi Arabia and Qatar and turn Qatar into an island. So yeah, I mean, and he like put that out for construction companies to bid on, so now they are going to build a high speed electric rail between the two capitals. This is going to tie into the high speed rail that Saudi Arabia is already building with China. They've already built, I know they've built 500 some miles of it between Medina and Mecca. And then I think the plan was to continue building it across the Arabian desert and then up the coast of the Persian Gulf. And so it would make sense it's going to tie right into Qatar. But again, like Qatar, like what happened with Qatar and Saudi Arabia is that when Qatar was basically alienated from the Arab League in 2017 by MBS with the backing of Trump, Qatar was forced to make amends with Iran because at the time, Qatar and Iran were not friends. But out of pure desperation, Qatar was forced to turn to Iran for diplomacy, and they became allies. And I think that opened up a channel of communication that Trump and MBS are now utilizing through Qatar. So the more I see Saudi Arabia and Qatar cooperating, the more I think that is a signal that we're going to see more cooperation between Saudi Arabia and Iran. And that, by the way, is like geographically makes sense because you have Qatar, the peninsula, and the Persian Gulf. It's basically flanked by Iran and Saudi Arabia on either side. And so it would make a lot of sense that it would be in Qatar's interest to make sure that those two are getting along so that it doesn't destabilize, their area, their region of responsibility, so to speak.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And you also had, not that long ago, the reopening up of diplomatic bridges between Iran and Saudi Arabia, which had been destroyed when I think it was Saudi Arabia that had killed or executed a very, very popular Shia imam and something like 40 of his supporters that were beheaded publicly. Not, I think that was like 2016 or something that this happened, and it completely destroyed any type of connection of economic or diplomatic ties. The embassies were shut down in either country, and there was no discussions happening between Iran and Saudi Arabia on a public level, at least. And then finally, a couple of years ago, that was undone. There was like a reopening of the embassies. It seems like a restart in a certain way, assisted by China, which went in to provide a lot of financial investments through their BRI in both countries as well, which seemed to be the secret sauce that allowed this. And now you have here, what do you got? The ex-Saudi intel chief saying what?
Yeah, so this is a guy that I've been tracking for a while, Turkey Al Faisal. This is the son of King Faisal, the guy, like the king who met with JFK and then like did the oil embargo during the Yom Kippur War, and then was signed the petrodollar deal with Henry Kissinger. Probably, not totally thrilled about it, and then was immediately assassinated like a year later by his nephew, who had just returned from the United States and was probably an MK Ultra victim. But his son, Turkey Al Faisal, I've always found a very fascinating character. This guy, I think, was in charge of Saudi intelligence for like 20 years, as I understand it, resigns on September 1st, 2001. Like he resigns on August 31st, and he says effective immediately. So the very next day it was in effect. He's like, I'm quitting immediately. And my speculation has been that he figured out what was going on and was like, I want nothing to do with this, and walked away. Like, understood he could not stop the inertia that was in play and just walked away from it. He was also
I've been following that guy for a while, but it seems like, he had a lot of frustration inside of him, because I always saw this guy even back in when, the BAE Systems deal was going public. That was demonstrating the Saudi role of the Al Yamama deal, the Dove deal that was signed back in the 80s to provide for basically selling like whole ships full of oil to Britain in exchange for massive amounts of weapons. And the idea was the sale of this oil would then provide for Black Ops funding that I think is something like $100 billion that they built up off the books that would then be used for funding, basically any type of Black Ops operation around the world, including 9/11, seems to have received some money from that operation. And I always saw, and that was, in my mind at the time, people like Prince Bandar bin Sultan and Faisal, when he was still running the intel ops for Saudi Arabia. I just thought they were all super bad. And this guy might have been playing this. I mean, Prince Bandar was super bad. There's nothing redeeming in him.
I agree about that, about Prince Bandar, yes.
This guy, it seems, maybe was, like you said, having a go with the momentum of something he didn't know how to deal with. And finally, when he was allowed to speak a little bit, his heart has come out saying some pretty useful things and playing what seems to me a useful role. So I hope that that's all good. And yeah.
And so, and then the other thing that I thought was really significant, like Signal, because I do view MBS, the Crown Prince, I do view him as the spiritual successor of Faisal. Like, I think Faisal, this guy's father, was definitely like what the family would describe as a true Bedouin. Back like 100 years ago, because he was born. I mean, he would have been born in like 1913, something like that. He, at 13 years old, there's like pictures of him. He looks like a child, like literally a child, but he was leading men into battle on horseback, because, at the time they were fighting on horseback. Like he would rather sleep in a tent than sleep in a palace. He's like a true Bedouin, which is what the family also says to describe MBS. And then Turkey, who's the son, this guy here, he was the guy that MBS selected to speak publicly for the first time on behalf of Saudi Arabia after October 7th. Saudi Arabia was like radio silent for 3 weeks. Like, they didn't say a word. And I thought that was very strange. Other than just to summon everybody, they said, all right, everyone's going to come in a month to Riyadh, and we're all going to get on the same sheet of music. And then when it came time for them to address the public for the first time, this is the guy who got up and spoke, which I thought was very significant. The fact that it wasn't MBS, it wasn't Faisal bin Farhan, it wasn't King Salman, it was this guy, Turki al-Faisal, who I think right now is just considered like I mean, they describe him here as the former intelligence chief. So he's maybe like an advisor, but I don't think he has like an official role in the government. But he's obviously very, very like thought of very highly by MBS.
Oh yeah, I mean this guy's clearly like an He's like somebody who's spent decades in power and has a lot of influence. So he's clearly not an official position, but he's got clout and wields it.
He's also been like throughout the past 2 years while the Gaza thing has happened, and MBS and the Saudis have basically adopted this very like boilerplate response to everything. Like we are committed to the two-state solution. We are committed to restoring the borders to 1967. Like Israel must leave Gaza. Like Israel must stop this war. Like very boilerplate, right? And then everyone was screaming at the Arabs and the Saudis and saying, "You traitors! You're allowing this to happen. Do something." This guy was actually going out and doing interviews and saying the thing out loud that I think they were expecting like the government to say, which, you know, he was kind of being a little more aggressive in his rhetoric, and laying the blame at certain people and naming names and stuff. So I kind of see this guy as like a surrogate who kind of operates outside of the official channels, because I don't think he has like an official role in the government. However, he seems to come in at these key moments and make these statements. And the statement right here is the real troublemaker in the Middle East is Israel. It's not Iran. Iran is not the regional threat. It is Israel that is the regional threat. And I think he's 100% right. I think most people at this point who are tracking this stuff would agree with him. So I think that's significant. And I think that there's a lot of things that are happening right now that are going to come to a head here in the next 3 weeks. Here's as far as the Middle East, here is Netanyahu is going to meet Trump on December 29th at the White House. Trump has been putting out for weeks now that he wants to implement the second phase of the Gaza plan in the next or by Christmas is what he was saying. And then you had Turkey saying that they're ready to deploy in the ISF. So here's the Jerusalem Post. Turkish troops ready for Gaza ISF. U.S. pressuring Israel to allow it, security sources say. So Turkey's sitting here saying, hey, we're ready. Like, we're ready to roll. Like, we are ready to go. We like deploy us into Gaza. We can make this happen. And the idea, like in theory, the idea is that the ISF comes in, they take control of like basically policing Gaza, right? And then as they get their bearings and get their sea legs, so to speak, the IDF pulls back and leaves. Like that's what the plan's supposed to be. Netanyahu has been throwing shade on that like the whole time, saying, yeah, we don't really think that's going to actually happen. That's not really going to work. So I think that we're going to have a major moment between Trump and Netanyahu on December 29th, where it's going to be like a shit or get off the pot moment. And it's not good. It's not like, I don't think Netanyahu's getting a horse-drawn carriage and a flyover by the F-15s on December 29th.
Well, I was enlivened to hear that, because one of the biggest, I guess, casts of shade that in my mind over the Gaza peace deal was always the specter of Tony Blair. But I was happy to discover that Blair has been flushed. So that has enlivened my hopes that there's a chance that this could actually result in some outcome that is actually beneficial both to the Palestinians and peace more broadly, and also perhaps, I mean, when you have, again, the thing for me, I don't know what were the negotiations that originally got Sir Tony Blair installed as a prospective overseer, viscount of this technocratic government of the Gaza Peace Council. I don't know what it was, but it definitely served as potentially a bargaining chip, because a lot of Arab leaders were a bit freaked out to have that guy back in an actual governing position right in the heart in the Middle East, and they were not happy, and finally said, hey, let's make this work, but don't let Blair come in as he's being threatened to come in. So that's good. That's a good thing. we'll see where this goes. But that's the fact that Turkey is also so willing to commit the troops also demonstrates a willingness to get some Arab police forces in place to to actually do the heavy lifting. So hopefully this is what it is.
Yeah. And that's a great point. Like the Tony Blair, that was something that never really got me to like I never stressed too much about Tony Blair because I don't recognize Tony Blair as like a benevolent figure. I recognize that he was very much a part of the coalition of the willing under George Bush. He was very much shilling for the global war on terror. And somehow he injected himself into this whole like Gaza thing very early on. Like, I think even before October 7th, he was like putting together proposals to like rebuild Gaza. The way I always kind of read that is it seemed like the inertia that he was bringing to the table, they just kind of brought him in and was like, okay, this guy is going to be kind of a turd in the punch bowl because he's going to piss off the Arabs. He's also going to piss off Netanyahu because him and Netanyahu do not get along. He was always very good friends with Ehud Barak. And the Netanyahu's opposition, all the guys who put Netanyahu out of office, that would be Ehud Barak in 1999, and then Olmert, I think was like in 2005 or something like 2006, something like that. Both of those prime ministers were Netanyahu's opposition. Both those guys, by the way, on the Epstein list. But the fact that like Tony Blair was involved didn't really freak me out because it seemed like, it's like, why the hell is Tony Blair involved? But Netanyahu doesn't like him. The Arabs don't like him. I didn't think that would last. It's not lasting. The last thing I'll say on the Middle East is this clip, which I know you'll appreciate. This is from RT. Okay, so this is so there is like a Doha summit, like a Doha like conference forum, I think is what the Doha forum in Qatar over the weekend. And Laura Loomer and Mark Levin are losing their mind because like Tucker Carlson was there and Donald Trump Jr. was there. And Tom Barrack was there, of course, because Tom Barrack is the U.S. ambassador to Turkey and the special envoy to Syria. Listen to what he says here.
First thing that has to happen is we have to allow them, Syria, to define it themselves without going in.
And he's being asked, what is the Syrian government? What is the structure of the Syrian government going to look like? Because people were proposing like a federalist system, kind of like we have in the United States. And listen to what he says.
First thing that has to happen is we have to allow them, Syria, to define it themselves without going in with Western expectations of saying we want a democracy in 12 months. We've never had a democracy anyway. I don't see a democracy. Israel can claim that it's a democracy, but in this region, really what's worked the best, whether you like it or you don't like it, is a benevolent monarchy. That first thing.
And so again, like what works best in this region is the benevolent monarchy. That's what works best. It's not the fact that he says Israel can say it's a democracy, but I mean, come on, is it really a democracy? That had people losing their minds over this. Like Laura Loomer and Mark Levin flipped out, and I use them as a good gauge of like where the zeitgeist of the diaspora is at. But this aligns perfectly with what is stated in the national security strategy, because the national security strategy, it says we have to stop imposing our values on every other country, and we have to accept them for these other cultures for what they are. We have to learn to work with them as opposed to trying to coerce them or convince them to adopt our way of doing things. And that is what he's saying right there. He's saying this is what works in this part of the world. So instead of trying to tinker with it and copy paste the American system or the Western system, the European system on the Middle East, we're just gonna let them do what works for them.
That's so very important, because I mean that's this idea of trying to just impose a one size fits all structure onto the nations of the world has been that's the cause of why the world's been lit on fire for decades and decades, based on this religious fetishization of the word democracy without any of the meaning, because it's coming from a country as well. Like in the West, we do this virtue signaling, and we've been doing it for decades, saying like, because we're a democracy, which is the best kind of government in the world, that we can impose democracies as a system onto other governments that don't do it. But it's like, are we really a democracy? Is that really what we are? Like, did anybody hear of like what is Wall Street? Did they look at like what are the forces behind the scenes behind the elections that are actually like playing this game? So it's nice to be able to like just get some straight talking and having that enshrined as a U.S. foreign policy doctrine is obviously very important. So I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah, and so here's like you mentioned Africa, so I think we're gonna wrap up today.
I was gonna actually play a little clip by Trump on the Ukraine front and Kalas, the representative Kalas of the Free and Democratic Rules-Based Order. So I was gonna just do a little 46-minute clip, a second clip from Trump on Politico first.
Yep.
Your team has been going back and forth between Putin and Zelensky with various drafts of a peace deal. Which country right now is in the stronger negotiating position?
Well, there can be no question about it. It's Russia. It's a much bigger country. It's a war that should have never happened. Frankly, it wouldn't have happened if I were president, and it didn't happen for 4 years. I watched that taking place, and I said, wow, they're going to cause some problems here. And it started, and it could have evolved into World War III, frankly. I think it's probably not going to be happening now. I think if I weren't president, you could have had World War III. I think you would have had a much bigger problem than you have right now. But right now, it's a big problem. It's a big problem for Europe, and they're not handling it well.
So on the one hand, you have some more straight talking there, which is obviously a breath of fresh air. But at the same measure, Trump had also said that Zelensky is being more trouble than he's worth. Like he already sabotaged or has worked with the Europeans to sabotage any common sense peace deal that the U.S. and the Russians had worked out, especially on the territorial acknowledgments that, Ukraine might have to just give up some of the territories that had voted democratically to join Russia. So from there, it seems like Zelensky has come out saying that he's open for elections after years of martial law. He said, within 60 days, he says, now these are words, but things are definitely, there's a changing quality in the air. But Kalas came out and she also had a little bit of a freak out. Now, this is a woman who has said that the idea that Russia had fought the Nazis or had done the heavy lifting fighting the Nazis was giant revisionism of history that didn't even happen. So she even denied in a public speech a few months back that the Russians had lost like over 25 million people fighting the Nazis and did the most lifting. She said, no, it was all us. It was all the West. It was all Estonia. But it's like, wait a minute, Estonia. Yeah. Well, she's from Estonia, right? So she's a foreign minister. And she would say that it's us who did all that work. But it's like, no, Estonia is like rampantly full of pro-Nazi scum. Like, I mean, I don't know what her grandpa was doing, but that's a huge problem right now. They're raising pro-Nazi monuments and renaming, just like Ukraine was, street names to like Nazi killers in her country. But anyway, she said this.
So speaking of our partners, I want to address here a concern I think is in all of our minds. The U.S. national security strategy sends a clear message that we should be more self-confident when it comes to Russia, yes, but also when it comes to China, and sometimes regarding our own allies like the United States. But it is, as a citizen who has lived under an autocratic regime, I can tell you that European Union, and then here also there are many of us who have lived under autocratic regimes, the European Union is the very essence of freedom. So any such criticism regarding the liberties here should be aimed at different direction. Russia, perhaps, where dissent is banned, where free media is banned, where political opposition is banned, where X or Twitter, as we know it, is in fact also banned. So the European Union, 27 countries who have voluntarily chosen to work together, and we have several others who want to join. That shows the quality of us.
I love that. So, isn't it? The delusion is just wild, right? Like the European Union, which is the essence of freedom. I don't know what point that equation got stuck in her head, but she's basically responding to Trump's broader political interview where he's actually throwing some fire onto Ukraine and propping up Russia, basically making the point that, look, Russia's got the upper hand. They're going to win this thing, and Ukraine should start doing some elections. So she's trying to like deflect that away to say that, no, actually, you should be devoting all of your anger like we are to Russia. And I'm seeing that you're pulling up a map there.
Yeah.
What do you have a map?
Let me just educate Kaja real quick on her ancestry. Estonia was occupied by the Soviets in 1940 and declared neutrality throughout World War II. So Estonia literally didn't do any fighting for anybody. They didn't fight for or against anybody. They were occupied by the Soviets and they didn't do a damn thing. So when she says we, it's like, who are you talking about? We didn't do anything. Russia and the United States liberated Europe, but Estonia did absolutely nothing. So why don't she needs to go spend a little more time in the library reading up on what her grandfather's generation was up to. So but anyway, I digress. This is actually a good trend.
Actually, I just want to show you before you digress. I'm just uploading this little short clip just because I hope it's uploading as we speak right now, and it's going to be done in a second, featuring just this woman who's literally using the words. So it's not just me like paraphrasing what she's saying, but it's actually her saying it directly. It's just such a wild thing where she says, here it is. Okay.
What was interesting, that Russia was addressing China, like you and like Russia and China, we, fought the Second World War. We won the Second World War. We won the Nazism. And I was like, okay, that is something new. But then you can see, first you can, if you know history, then, it raises a lot of question marks in your head. But, I can tell you nowadays people don't really read and remember history that much, which is that, you can see that they buy these narratives.
Sorry, I had to share that directly because it's so out of this world. China lost 9 million people fighting the Japanese fascists. The Russians lost over 28 million fighting the Nazis. 92% of the German Wehrmacht was taken up by the Russians, not the West. And she's saying, "I've never heard this before." And it just I had to share that.
Yeah. You've never heard this before. Yeah. I mean, I would be curious to know what even her depth of knowledge is on like her own history. Like she doesn't even seem to know the history of her own people, which is really sad that she's a leader and she doesn't know any of that stuff. But not surprising, not at all surprising. I would point your attention to a few things. Number one, like in response to her talking about people wanting to join the European Union, here is Thomas Massey just introduced legislation apparently to or he's pushing for withdrawal from NATO, which I think is outstanding. And I think this is the logical this is the logical end game of like where this is all going. Is I think NATO's going to collapse, but I think it's going to start with the United States leaving NATO. And then and basically the burden is going to be put on Germany, and then Germany's probably going to leave NATO too, and then it's just going to collapse. Yeah. But basically we've already effectively kind of put one foot out the door, the United States, because we've said we're not giving y'all anything anymore. You can buy weapons from us, and then you can deploy the weapons however you see fit. And that is a system that's going to bankrupt NATO. Whatever money they have left, that's going to bankrupt them. And then I think Germany's probably going to get tired of carrying the burden, and eventually you're going to get the AfD political party is going to get into power. They're going to throw out Merz, and they're probably going to pull out of NATO. And then probably even a more nationalistic party will come in after them and just say, you know what, we don't even want to be in the European Union anymore. Like, see y'all later.
Yeah, right.
So like that's where I think that is going. She needs a serious reality check. But on that note, the really interesting dynamic that's happening here is it is Trump and MAGA versus the Europeans. We've seen this over the past week, ever since the national security strategy was released. all these European influencers, the OSINT guys, the guys who study the satellite images and are like, oh yeah, Putin's losing, right? Who had, these are guys who have like hundreds of thousands of followers on X. All of them have been like pulling their hair out, saying how America is now the new enemy. And they're like, we've allowed this MAGA thing to metastasize for too long. Like, we need to go after MAGA. It's time for Europe to deal with MAGA, as if Europe has the ability to do anything other than just assume the fetal position and allow anyone, whether it's Russia, the United States, the Middle East, impose themselves on Europe, which is pretty much what's happening now. Trump is also taking on his own party. He's taking on the Republican establishment, which wants to see a war with Russia. Obviously, they want to see a war with Venezuela. They want to see a war with China. They want wars everywhere. They want wars with Iran for sure. They want World War III, and that's what that would be, because all those countries I just named are all already in alliance with one another. So you now have this article, West and Ukraine discussing Korean-style peace deal. According to the Washington Post, land swaps combined with a demilitarized zone are intended to make agreement more palatable for Kiev, David Ignatius has claimed. And what's funny is that... I'm sorry.
Sorry, no, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was going to pivot to a different headline if you...
No, I would ask a question just on, is this the David Ignatius who was tied to the NED, or is this a different David Ignatius?
Oh, I think it's the same one who's tied to the NED. I think if it's the Washington Post, it's got to be the same one who's yeah. Right. Funny that he's trying to speak on behalf of of the West. Yeah. But then you have, I think this is really more signal here, Kirill Dmitriev saying Ukraine and its Western backers trying ceasefire trick. A temporary armistice would not provide a long-term peace solution, Kirill Dmitriev has argued. And he says, quote, Zelensky and UK and EU warmongers trying again the trick with a temporary ceasefire that does not resolve all key outstanding issues and does not provide a long-term peace solution. And then he's quoting actually on his post, Trump's ex-post from back in August when him and Putin met in Alaska, where Trump says it was determined by all of the best way to end the horrific war between Russia and Ukraine is to go directly to a peace agreement, which would end the war, and not a mere ceasefire agreement, which oftentimes do not hold up. President Zelensky will be coming to DC, etc. Yeah, and so I think, a ceasefire, I think, sounds great in the eyes of the warmongers, as opposed to an actual peace solution. Look at Korea right now. Korea is still technically at war with one another, and it's 70 years later. So yeah, they would love that. They would love this threat, this ever existing threat of war, ever present threat of war between Russia and Ukraine at any given moment. That would be fantastic, a fantastic fragile peace for the warmongers. But the problem for them is, as all of this is unfolding, I think we discussed it last week, but the corruption that's just brimming to the top now in Ukraine, and it's spilling over. I think we're going to see a lot of these corruption lines tie back to America pretty soon. It's only a matter of time before Republican congressmen are going to be implemented in this. And it might be Democrat congressmen who are named first, but rest assured that we're going to see Republican side to this. And to that point, we have, I know you mentioned it before we started today,
like raids on NATO staff offices over procurements, or you're talking about the raids on Ukrainian government officials for corruption and graft? Oh, there you go. Yeah, NATO corruption scandal, right? Yeah,
well, and here actually before we go,
we only got a couple of minutes left, so we're gonna have to. Before you do that, here, as you think about it, let's do one more ad read here. 1 second, and I'll cool. And then we'll transition away. So let me just make sure I've got the right ad here it's this soft disclosure, and I don't have to read anything. It's naturally all there. Just gotta make sure I've got the right one. Here it is. Bam.
Soft disclosure. Just dropped new favorites for the season. The lotion, your 5-ounce favorite, is still here. And now we've added full 11-ounce bottles. New lavender tea tree deodorant, Clean, calm, and effective. New tallow bars, chamomile lemon rose, and naked. Rich moisture that actually works. And now the lineup is complete. Beard oil in unscented and spiced vanilla. Palo lip balms, available in chamomile mint, vanilla, naked, and vanilla tangerine. Palo bar minis for pocket-ready hydration. Available in vanilla coffee and naked. And finally, lavender vanilla lotion. Clean, calm, and made to work. Visit softdisclosure.com. Use code BADLANDS and get 15% off. Soft Disclosure, for truth you can gift.
All right. So yeah, I got a couple minutes left. So if there's any key points you want to hit.
We have this 1 minute clip from McGregor once again saying what I think we talked about last week.
I think there are preparations to fly Zelensky and much of his inner circle to Israel, where they have immunity against extradition for criminal proceedings, and that's what they're going to need when they finish up in Ukraine. They've got 1 foot right now in Ukraine and the other foot really in the door of the aircraft to fly them out. People don't realize how weak and fragile this Ukrainian government is. Earlier today, I received some information from Eastern Europe, and I was told that people are coming out of the basements and homes in Prokhovsk, and they're saying, to the Russians, thank God, let's get this over with, help end this war. And many of them are saying what initially back in 2022 in February, March, April, we're saying in Luhansk and Donetsk, what took you so long? I think increasingly the population that lives in eastern Ukraine and much of the population in the West desperately wants an end to this war. And they realize it will only end with one outcome. That is the elimination of Zelensky and his regime. I think
to that point, we have this headline, and then we'll shut it down. NATO corruption scandal triggers Israeli arms contracts cuts. And so this company, Elbit Systems, which is an Israeli company that does a number of things. It provides microchips for missiles, but primarily it does autonomous remote controlled drones. So not just aircraft, but also like land-based drones. And we've seen a lot of those being used all over Ukraine. So apparently there's a lot of corruption with and embezzlement with this company and the money that was flowing to Ukraine. So we already have now Israel implicated in the Ukrainian corruption. I think the next step is getting the Republican Party implemented in the Ukrainian corruption, and it's just going to become everyone's going to start running for the hills away from this.
Yeah, there's a lot of skeletons being dragged out of the dark closets and into the light of day. So that gives us a lot of reason to hope. We didn't get a chance to talk about the Africa front, but we've got a week ahead of us, and I'm sure a lot more is going to happen. There's been some crazy developments that haven't yet fully unfolded, but I'm sure we'll be able to fuse that into our conversation for the next episode.
Yes.
Until then,
I am just to let everyone know, I am going to do a bonus episode of my geopolitics show today at 2:00, so in an hour. Just because yesterday we spent the whole show reading through the national security strategy. So if you want to join me in an hour, I'm probably going to dive deeper into the Africa story, but we'll certainly talk about it next week on the show.
All right, sounds like fun. Okay, thank you everybody for joining us. Till next week, and actually, hope you all join up with Gordon in about what did you say, an hour?
An hour. So yeah, 2:00 Eastern.
Okay. All right. Take care.
Thank you so much for joining us, and don't forget to hit the thumbs up on this video. And a special thank you to all of our advertising partners. Please remember to shift your dollars to support those businesses that support Badlands Media.